All right, our next film is one that I've been very anxious to talk about. I think this could be the next big fight. Actually, no, I think you might like this one too.
Which is
but
interesting because I was the one that was pushing for this film.
I mean, you brought it up a few times.
But I
was looking forward to it. I just wasn't like
sure,
super like gotta see it, anything like that.
Sure, I just feel like when we were talking about like a week or so ago, like things we should cover, I was like, I'm hearing really good things about the killing of two lovers.
Well, that was just a timing thing. I wanted to do a whole bonus episode, but we just couldn't work out. Yeah, sure. It wasn't that I wasn't excited about it. I was just. But I think like
I'm talking about even before we proposed a bonus episode. Like I was just talking like for the next week or last week's episode. I was like, hey, this is one that we might want to put on the radar, and you're like, I guess I can probably get a screener for it.
You are distorting reality a little bit here.
I am not.
You're making it sound like you came to me with like just like a little change bucket of like spare change, John. Like, I don't know. I remember it being a little bit more flippant like that. I was like, oh, I guess there's killing of two lovers, but who cares? And I see I'm doing the same thing.
See, I would review the tape, but go ahead and check or introduce this movie. I mean.
All right, The Killing of Two Lovers, and this is probably the extent of the heat between the two of us. But yeah, this is a new indie drama. It was written, directed, produced, and edited by Robert Machoian. It takes place in Utah. It stars Clayne Crawford, Sepideh Moafi, Chris Coy, Avery Pizzuto, Arri Graham, and Ezra Graham. And it actually premiered at Sundance last year. That's when I first heard about it. And Neon got the rights to it, I think, not too long ago. I think like end of 2020, Neon got the distribution. And I really wanted to see this at Sundance last year, but just didn't quite get to it. But I heard really good things. And its Rotten Tomato score is interesting. It's an 88%. So it's a little bit lower than I thought it would be because I think this movie is terrific. One of my favorite movies of the year. I'm very anxious to talk about it. I think that it's a shame that it's kind of being like, it feels like it's kind of like being dumped right now in like early summer when I think that it's something that deserves way more attention. But I want to highlight too, Clayne Crawford is the main guy in this movie. What a performance. It's one of the performances that I think at the end of the year, when we're looking in like the Oscar conversation, I'll be just in so much pain because I think that he is one of the most worthy actors of getting like a Best Actor nomination, and I'm feeling like that's not going to happen. Very unlikely. The setup for this movie is that Clayne Crawford is the estranged father of these kids, estranged only in the sense that his wife and him have been having a falling out. They got married when they were very young, still in high school, because she got pregnant. So they have a teenage daughter and 3 boys. And she is starting to kind of move on from the relationship, even though they are not legally divorced. They have been separated, trying to figure things out. And we really just watch this man in snowy Utah. He's staying with his father, not too far from the house itself. And he is just silently, painfully grieving his situation. And most of this movie is us sort of peeking into his psyche. The good, the bad, and the terrible, because most of this movie kind of shows how he is with people on the outside, which is, vulnerable. He's trying to be understanding of the situation. He's trying to win back his wife, who is starting to see another man. But the movie also shows us, because it's sometimes it feels like it's just in real time. There are a lot of long takes in this. It shows us to know that underneath there is something really dark, something really toxic, struggling to get out, and he doesn't quite know what to do with it. I think that of the movies I've seen very recently, the last year or so, or maybe a couple of years, this to me is one of the best films at capturing the multidimensional issues that men face and that men struggle with and don't, I think, always have the tools to process and to express in a healthy way. And I found this movie so instructive in that sense and beneficial for people to see, to kind of understand, like, yeah, men come off a certain way sometimes, but there can be something really dark underneath that needs to be resolved, because if it isn't, it can result in something really bad. So I'm a huge fan of this movie, but it sounds like you got something you want to bring up.
I was just going to say a good old classic example of what they call on Twitter toxic masculinity.
It's a buzzword at this point, a loaded term for sure. And I think sometimes people hear toxic masculinity and they're like, you're anti-man. You're just trying to make men the villain of every story. And I think that is not, first of all, that's not the way that I use the term. That is not the way that I think that people should use it. It's not about that. It really is something that's trying to benefit and help men to overcome a lot of these problems. So I just want to be super clear about that, because like, sometimes I'm just saying, like, I don't think we use the word wrong or anything, but I think some people hear that. It's like the word woke. It just gets like bastardized by people with bad intentions trying to like create problems, you know? And so I just wanted to put that out there, that I think that this movie, please do not hear us being like men are the worst. It's nothing like that.
Sure. Well, we're two dudes just talking it out.
We're here for our bros. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. Dudes rock. Yeah, well, to be fair, toxic masculinity is a phrase, not a word, but I do agree with you otherwise.
Sorry, a term, you know, yeah.
Yes. But, yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely, I think, I mean, when I was reading about the film, I didn't see anything about it going into it, but when I just kind of read the general synopsis, I was like, yeah, that sounds like my bag. And sure enough, I did like it quite a bit. Yeah, I think what impresses me about the film is how it's able to communicate, as you were mentioning, this sort of heightened sense of intensity and like this like overwhelming sense of dread, while also incorporating another different sort of dread that's like a different vibe, but it's rather seamless in the film, which is a sort of like domestic discomfort and like this kind of like small scale sense of like not a lot is really happening in his life, but like there is like this constant sense of like he's gonna say or do the wrong thing and like everything's just gonna blow up in his face, like even beyond the kind of general sense of like he might do something really bad to other people. Like there's this like sense of like he's gonna slip up and like say the wrong thing to his daughter, and that's gonna like drive him away from his wife even more, and like he's gonna not really be there for his kids more than he already is at this point. And yeah, I mean it's a very showy film, which I admire, and it also kind of bugs me because it's so style heavy that it just kind of feels like, because this is a new and upcoming filmmaker, that they're almost kind of like showing off, being like, look what I can do, like look how I can incorporate negative space, look how I can use the box frame, or like what do you call that, where it's like everything now looks like it's like filmed in a box.
The aspect ratio of it.
Yeah, aspect ratio. Yeah, but what I forget, what is that, 1.4 or
no, 4.3, 4:3 I think.
4.
Is it?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Because it does shift at one point to like I think 1 point something, but I won't specify when because that's a spoiler. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything you said. I mean, in terms of like the themes and the thematics of it, it's a very well done character drama, very focused character drama. And it's also a brisk, I think, 87 minutes. I know it's under 90 minutes, which I also
it's 84
really appreciate.
Minutes. Yeah, it's close.
84. Yeah, it's a real tight firecracker of a movie.
It is. Yeah, there's no fluff in this whatsoever. Yeah, to me, it's like kind of the reverse of The Hateful Eight in terms of its cinematography. That was a movie that had these massive landscapes for only part of it, but then like most of it was interior. So you had like a 70 millimeter like widescreen experience, but interior, indoors. This movie has a lot of landscapes. It has a lot of this movie is spent outside. Almost the vast majority of it is outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's boxed in. And I think that, yeah, it's the reverse in that sense. And I think that it serves the story, personally. I don't think it's flashy for the sake of it. I do think...
I'm not saying it's flashy for the sake of it. I'm just saying the presentation of the film is pretty showy, just in terms of, like, look what I can do. But I agree with you that it does serve the point of the film. So it's not like it's just bad... I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
I don't think it's gratuitous, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I
agree.
I think that like it's helped a lot because this movie kind of lives and dies by the central performance. If Crawford isn't good in this, then it doesn't work.
Who produced it as well, I believe, right?
He did, yeah. He produced it along with Robert Machoian, the director, and Scott Christopherson. But he has to balance such a difficult, almost impossible line between being sympathetic and pitiful and outright villainous. because the movie starts with a moment that immediately sets our minds about him. And then the rest of the movie has to sort of bring all of that to a more multi-dimensional and more 360-degree view of a human being. And it feels almost like a magic trick, the way that the movie pulls it off, because it does it without ever going down this road of being like, hey, even if somebody does something super terrible and super wrong, you just sort of have to forgive them, sans anything else. And I think the fact that the movie is so tight and it avoids that problem, I think is the mark of a really focused filmmaker who had a lot of confidence in what he had to say. And I think that, man, this movie is just devastating. Like watching this dad with his kids, and just like the painfulness of niceness, this like halfway insincere, like congenial performance within a performance where he's being a certain way in order to get something he wants. But the thing that he wants is something that is like understandable. Of course he wants to, save his marriage. He wants to be with his kids. But I think, the movie also reckons with his intentions of him trying to like win back his marriage. And I'll just say this movie's last like 15 minutes were just jaw-dropping to me. Like I thought I had this movie figured out, and I still am like processing kind of where it goes from there, how it deals with certain things, and it's just it's a knockout for me.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was as positive as you are, but I definitely agree that everything that you're saying is key to why I find it to be a very good film. And I generally just tend to enjoy films like this that tend to be very specific in their focus and have a very intent point, but they also find the sort of dry and dark humor of their kind of sad and as you said, pathetic main character. It's a very kind of like Jody Hill type thing. And I guess to some extent the Coens as well, since we brought them up before.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think the director here, he has a very specific and pointed sense of style and a very clear idea of who he wants his character to be and how he wants to communicate that. And likewise, through Clayne Crawford's performance, he's able to channel that sense of discomfort and anxiety and dread in a way that is unnerving but not overly taxing. And I think also that's key to why being 84 minutes is why this works really well, because like I can't imagine them pulling this off at a like even 104 minute runtime. So yeah, I mean, a very economical film in that sense as well, and just a good film.
Very tense. I was, some of these scenes, I'm like sitting at the edge of my seat, literally, like I can't like relax, I'm just like, what in the world is going to happen next? Such a great debut film in that sense that he was able to pull that off. I was very compelled by it, and I kind of got into this in the beginning. I just think that there's something so simple but also so valuable about a character study like this, where I just think that sometimes I just get the feeling that I like the demons that men face are sort of like written off or downplayed, and there's a real problem with violence and how men use violence to sort of like get past their emotional hangups. And I think ultimately that's what this film is about. And I think it actually has something a little unconventional to say about that in a way that kind of surprised me. I think it was headed toward an ending where I think that could have been totally trite and definitely not the kind of like where it ends up being like one of the most claustrophobic scenes I've ever seen in the outdoors. Like it really is one of those things. And I think toxic masculinity is the way is certainly an effective descriptor, despite the way I think some people misuse that term. But to me, I see it more as like a masculinity in crisis more than anything else. And I think that this movie is just trying to like reckon with that. My only issues with it will hold me back from this being like a home run in every sense is I think that the father character is a little underutilized. I think they kind of drop some threads with that. I think they maybe end the movie a little bit too soon to maybe get into the dynamic between the father and son. I think that's kind of just like spoken about, but it's not quite, I don't know, it doesn't really go anywhere. Where I thought that was kind of a little misleading almost. I'm not sure if that's fair to say, to be honest.
I don't think it's misleading, but I think they could have done a little bit more to set up his character to make the ending hit a little bit harder.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would make sense to bring the dad more into it because ultimately it's a movie about dads. And sure. I just think that, he's barely a side character. So, though to me, just felt like a missed opportunity, if anything, but doesn't wreck the movie whatsoever.
I mean, just based on how the movie chooses to incorporate his character at the end, it just kind of feels like they could have done a little bit more to set that up, especially with the lean runtime. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ineffective how they incorporate him in the film as it is.
But yeah, I've said a lot. Clearly, I'm a big fan of this movie. I hope a lot of people watch it. And I don't think, I'm going to give it a pretty high grade. I don't think everyone's going to have the same experience with it. I think some people are going to maybe not love this movie as much. I could see some people being bored by it because they're just not on its wavelength. I could see that happening, and that would be a shame. But I hope people check it out anyway because I think that it's a worthwhile experience for sure. So I'm an A- on The Killing of Two Lovers. Definitely one of my favorites of 2021 that I've seen so far. What about you, Will Ashton? B-, C+? How are we feeling?
I'm not as high as you are, but not too far from it either. I'd give it a firm B+. I just think it generally works the way it's intended to, and I found it to be appropriately unnerving. I did find its presentation maybe a little too flashy. It did almost take me out of the film at times, but at the same time, I think it's very smartly executed. I think it knows exactly what it wants to be, and by and large, I think it pulls it off. So, good stuff.
I just said B- to guard my heart. Also, we didn't mention the sound editing in this. There's some of that kind of incorporated that.
Yeah, the score is really unique.
It is. This is a whole episode of movies that are their own thing, in some ways, at least for some of these movies. But yeah, I thought that it was pretty effective. Whenever like these like sound cues started happening, I was like, and it was a very weirdly, almost like unexpectedly effective way of getting into his head that I just found different in a good way.
You say all these movies are different, but at their core, they all are about like these hyper masculine men who have troubled relationships with their daughters.
I mean, isn't that like most movies in general, to be fair?
Sure, but it's just like they're very specifically all about that. So it's just kind of a fascinating thing that, like, tonally, they're all over the map.
Yeah.
But like at their core, they're all kind of similar at the same time.
They do have a running. This episode of Cinemaholics has a running theme. That is to be certain.
Daddy issues.
Yeah, dad issues for sure. All right. Yeah. On that note, Killing of Two Lovers. It is available to watch. I believe it's in select theaters and VOD. I think I'm not 100% sure about that. I think you can watch it on VOD right now, maybe virtual cinemas. It is just 84 minutes long, as we mentioned. Thank you so much for listening to our show. Be sure to subscribe to Cinemaholics on your favorite podcast app of choice or find us on YouTube. See you all next time.